Hello, this is Michael Hexter, and welcome to Politics 2100 here on YouTube. So, in this episode, I'm going to do a little media criticism of a left channel that I appreciate very much. I'm a member of it, but I think what I have to say might be interesting to them and to listeners of that program, or just in general to people who are interested in left politics and media, so forth and so on, the 2024 presidential election. And it's about the handling of by the Majority Report. So the program is Sam Cedar, Emma Vigeland, Matt Lech, who are mostly the commentators. Also Bradley, and I'm blanking on his last name, is behind the scenes, but also provides commentary. And anyway, the Majority Report has had a few callers. No, had a caller a couple weeks ago, and then a caller earlier this week. About Marianne Williamson's campaign for the 2024 presidency, or the Democratic primary. She's running as a Democrat. And so the first caller called in and was challenging Sam to look more seriously at Marianne Williamson. And Sam was predicting pretty much that that Williamson would lose, and therefore, what's the use of thinking seriously about her? He seemed to want to get the call over with. It wasn't like he's someone who likes to debate libertarians. He seems like he would much prefer to have had a libertarian or a men's rights activist call him so he could debate him, or mostly him. But anyway, but in this case, this caller, was trying to challenge Sam to think about Marianne Williamson as a candidate and as someone of the left. And he, while he said some things that were sort of pro forma, positive things, the general tone he had, in my opinion, was of the dismissal, and also comparing her unfavorably to Bernie Sanders, that she was no Bernie Sanders in terms of her popularity and the possibility that she might have of winning, and so therefore he didn't really see a point of discussing it. And also, the discussion sort of devolved into a discussion of who he would vote for, and he kind of, I think, evaded some of the important issues involved in this discussion by sort of saying, well, voting, you want to vote, make your vote count, and if you're voting for someone who will definitely lose, that's not something you want to do. And then the second caller who called, I think, in response, and who referred to this phone call from a couple of weeks ago, sort of was still also bringing up, kind of resonating, as it did with me, the resonating of some of seemed to be contradictions in how Sam was, or Sam and Emma were thinking about Marianne Williamson versus other candidates, or versus the whole process. Anyway, this caller said some things that made him sound like he had unrealistic general ideas about message voting, and just sort of and allowing a fascist to win, so for allowing the Republican to win by just sort of being a purist in your voting, and so anyway, so I decided, there's an ongoing thing, and both Sam and Emma seem to be on the same page about Marianne Williamson. So just to sort of preface my perspective on Marianne Williamson before I get to my list of thoughts / criticisms of what went on. And this is, I think my criticisms have maybe more have things to do not only with Marianne Williamson, but maybe more generally with how political perspectives on being left in the current situation that we're in. Anyway, Marianne Williamson, I don't know everything she has written or said politically. I follow her on Twitter. Haven't read every tweet that she's made. I know that there are serious left people like Harvey Kay and Stephen Donziger who support her, and so I've heard her talk some, and I am glad that she has decided to run for presidency for the Democratic nomination, and I've talked on Politics 2100 about AOC. I would prefer AOC to run. She has a much larger platform, but AOC shows no interest in running for president in 2024. So Marianne Williamson is throwing her hat in the ring. I respect that, and I want to know more about her and to see how she develops as a candidate. Okay, and so I'm in some sense also reliant on media like the Majority Report to help me understand her better. So anyway, I also I have concerns about New Age spirituality. Some of it I think is interesting, but I'm not a New Age spiritual person. So I appreciate some of the ideas of sort of a cultural shift that I imagine Marianne Williamson is for, and that maybe animates her politics as well. So anyway, I will put links in the description box to the episodes where these callers were calling in, and you can see the interaction between the hosts of Majority Report and these callers. But what I'm taking away from these interactions is sort of, number one is that that the Majority Report and the hosts are not really taking their role as a media platform seriously enough in this particular instance, or inconsistently, in the sense that they really should invite Marianne Williamson on to discuss and maybe even debate her, whatever, but to not necessarily as an endorsement. So they don't, as a media platform, their vote or their endorsement is the least that they do. In other words, how Sam votes or how Emma votes in the voting booth is one 20,000th as powerful as what they do on this their channel, because their channel has 1.2 million subscribers. The videos that I'm going to link to, one has 49,000 views on it. So their voices are reproduced thousands and thousands of times by the interwebs, the YouTube servers and so forth and so on, and so they whatever they say there has more power than how they vote. So they have a choice, and their role, and then is primarily also to in that is not so much to tell people how they voted or didn't vote, but also just to provide a platform for people to talk about, and also to challenge, candidates about what they're going to do, or what they would like to do. So I think it's bad faith for Sam and Emma to not to to at least try that with, or bad faith, let's say they are, it's curious that they haven't, in these discussions with these callers, with regard to Marianne Williamson, they haven't said, well, we should have her on. Okay, it seems like a simple solution to this. And also, why should they have her on? Well, her views are closer to their views than anyone else who's running for president currently in 2024. And so, and my views. Okay, so, and it would make sense for that to happen. Now, could they have some information about Marianne Williamson that I don't have that is negative? Well, they could challenge her in that interview and say, well, people say you might be hard to work with, or they're worried about your new age spirituality. How can you reassure Americans that you won't drift off into your spiritual musings rather than focus on the reality of a presidential administration? So there are ways to do that are, the role of a good interviewer, and someone who's even sympathetic to that person's, politics. So I that didn't come up in either of these interactions with these callers, and there didn't seem to be any openness that literally that was being shut out the idea that she could be interviewed on the platform, not necessarily endorsed, but interviewed. So, and then, there, in these discussions about Marianne Williamson, it seemed to be all about, well, will the candidate win or not? So, and on the other hand, there was some talk about a messaging component of a presidential campaign. In other words, so I think Sam said in one of these segments that, Sanders started out his campaign as a messaging campaign. He didn't have an idea of how popular he would become because, he had these messages about the billionaire domination of our politics and about healthcare, about Medicare for all, so forth and so on. He wanted to get those into the public discussion in 2016. This interacts with, my first point, that yes, running a messaging campaign, even if you're not going to win, has some value. So a media platform has a particular role in getting a message out. So another reason to have a progressive candidate on a major left platform, not a major platform in the scheme of things in the United States, but a major left platform, which is the Majority Report, all the more reason to have someone on who is trying to run a messaging campaign that's trying to pull the discussion in the campaign to the left, to pull Biden probably, to the left again, to try to get him to bend, more, and to show the progressive base, the power of the progressive base, and to get him to at least fake left, Now that's a problem. Faking left is a problem because when they get into office, they don't actually enact left policies, or they do a few left things, but still, it's worse. The faking left is better than going hardcore neoliberal or hardcore, now post-neoliberal corporatist, China hawk, industrial policy, as apparently Biden has been doing in the last couple years. And also, in general, there's sort of this general Washington consensus that's sort of been building around that. So anyway, to get the messaging campaign is a real thing. It's not so the way Sam was talking about saying, well, you only consider candidates who will win, who will potentially win. It's like, well, unfortunately, we don't have some of that choice in so anyway. Also, let me just point number 3 is, unfortunately, the issues that we all care about, or not we all, but people on the left tend to care about, and often people think, well, the issues are really the important thing, or the social movement / for a particular issue, around a particular thing, is what really matters. The media, unfortunately, and the way our culture has been built up, our political culture has been built up, is that issues are attached to persons, to people. So people look at Bernie Sanders, for instance, as kind of this sort of agglomeration of a bunch of issues, and they sort of say, I'm for Bernie, as a shorthand to say, well, I'm for Medicare for all, so forth and so on. And there's some people also have sentimental attachment to him and to his manner and so forth and so on, his appearance. But it's also about this particular set of issues that he represents, and so. And this is not really something that's related to these particular segments of the Majority Report. They probably know what I'm saying, but still, we don't get what we want unless we don't get the media attention from other sources, from the cable news, without a strong progressive candidate somehow getting their way into progressive media, or an enormous social movement changing the complexion of politics, and that you can't always count on that enormous social movement emerging at the time it's needed, or that it not needed, but that you want it to appear, but or that it develops. I mean, that's a silly way to talk about social movements. But anyway, the final point I want to make is that using Bernie Sanders as the standard for every candidate that comes about is unrealistic, because Bernie Sanders had 40 years in politics, national politics, or 35 years in his run up to eventually running for president. So he including Vermont politics and then national politics. So he had a long track record, and he is sort of unique in some sense as being someone who preserved New Deal social democracy style politics around the Democratic Party, in and around the Democratic Party for a long dry period, okay, for that kind of politics. And so he, and in some sense, his politics also reflects that sort of cautiousness, I think, that is now, I think one of my criticisms of him is that he should be bolder, and he should have been bolder in his in some of his political interventions and so forth and so on. But he has preserved that, so he is a unique character in American politics, having both sort of street cred on the left, but also credibility within official Washington. And it's going to be very, very hard to find political replacement for that, okay? And that's not so. And he's not running, okay, in 2024, as far as we know. He might jump in, and he did sort of jump in late in 2016. He might jump in, but we need to mourn Bernie Sanders, not that he's passed away. He's still very active, and he's still doing great things in some of the roles that he occupies in Washington and in our politics more generally. But he's, basically, not every person who comes along is going to be exactly like him. And for that matter, we won't necessarily want everyone to be like him. Okay. And I'm someone who worked for his 2016 for his, not as in a paid position, but I volunteered in 2016, and in 2020 I was also trying to volunteer, but it was very hard to do during the pandemic. But anyway, it's using him as the standard is, I mean, yes, it was close. It was a pretty close race for a left person. In other words, from the perspective of previous left candidates, it was, it shows the extent to which our country, or the base of the Democratic Party, is substantially to the left than it was in decades previous. So that's good, but we need another figure might tap into that same base and even expand it. Okay. And part of the role, so maybe this is the last point, in other words, we can't predict it, this idea that, and this is something that came through in these videos, we can't really predict what's going to happen even in a few months in a candidacy, in a campaign. And we're performing the future, the social reality as we do it. In other words, any prediction you make can help. And this is where I think Sam, he denied this in the first caller when she said, this is a self-fulfilling prophecy. Well, you're definitely not doing your part, Sam Cedar and Majority Report, in helping at least this particular progressive candidates get as much airing as they can by predicting their loss immediately. And to say, or furthermore, even saying, even if it's realistic to say that, it's not encompassing your reality to not at least allow their voice to come through your platform, and you can filter it by asking them tough questions and showing maybe even your dislike for them personally by in ways that you may or may not feel. I don't know. Anyway, but that part, I don't think that they would do that if they had a candidate on, or Marianne Williamson on, and so forth and so on. But anyway, that caller was right in saying, like, you're not understanding the nature of political reality by making a prediction and then acting according to that prediction, especially in the role of a media person, a person who is not, you're not betting money on that person. I mean, that's actually something for donors to be concerned about. Is my donation going to someone who has a chance, has a shot, or is going to make my message bigger? And anyway, in the role of a media host, you're in part there to sort through the messages that people have, and the emissions that they have, of the language, the whatever it is, the actions they do, and to provide a place where people know more about them. Anyway, so I think I made that point in different ways throughout this video, but you by trying to predict things and then, or using the standard of Bernie Sanders and saying, well, it's not Bernie Sanders, so I'm not interested, or like Bernie Sanders, or exactly like that, the political reality that we will have in the next few years cannot be created, or the better political reality we hope we can create cannot always be measured based on that. And also doing the over-under on it beforehand is foreclosing some of that reality, is stopping it from happening. So, and that's not progressive, okay? Even though, I think, yeah, Marianne Williamson is a long shot, and will she could become a better candidate, a candidate which then you might become more enthusiastic about Majority Report hosts. Um, uh, but you have a role in that. Okay, you have a role in that, not necessarily about her alone. Go find yourself another set of progressive candidates uh, to interview now about 2024. Anyway, so a little bit of a challenge there, and maybe I will not be listened to, but I think I'm speaking reality here. Anyway, but please, if you are a listener or you are watching the videos, please share your thoughts about this particular set of issues I'm raising, and I look forward to hearing those things. And also, please like the video if you think this is a valuable service that I'm providing here, and also please subscribe to Politics 2100 if you're liking this and other videos. See you in the next video.